welcome to episode 11, season 2 of the Professional Evil Perspective. I'm Kevin Johnson, even though I don't know the name of this podcast, and
I'm Nathan Sweeney. How long have we been doing this, Kevin?
it blows my mind how often I can introduce something that I know and screw it up.
Yeah. I've always found that
we're leaving it in.
Yeah. I've always found that if I get on stage and I really think hard about what I'm wanting to say, I screw it up. But if I just get up and ramble for a few minutes, it tends to go fairly well.
Well, and it's funny, when I do presentations, I tend to get on stage a little bit early and just start talking.
Yeah.
Right? And that makes that flow. Whereas this, it's like this, okay, go. You're on stage. Go. I hate it. Yeah. But neither here nor there. So today, we're going to discuss Mr. Drama himself. I don't know how else to put it. It appears that every article I've seen has this very dramatic, fancy picture. I don't think I've seen an actual picture of this person. And for the people listening and don't know what I'm talking about, just recently, I think we should call him an ex-Google engineer, because hasn't he been fired or let go or quit?
I don't remember exactly if he was let go or if he was... I mean, we'll never know for sure. That's the thing with a story like this, is we hear his side of it, and Google's HR is never going to have a chance to tell their side of it, right? Ever. So that's all we're only going to get.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is a Google engineer who is no longer a Google engineer was working in the, what is it, Lambda?
I don't know how they pronounce. I've never seen it pronounced, but Lambda is the way it's spelled anyway.
Yeah, I always think of it as Lambda, but there's no B, is there?
There's no B. No, it's Lambda.
Right. So Lambda, not Lambda. But the AI has come to life. Now, that's the headline in the Washington Post.
So
right?
the picture that you're talking about, are you talking about him in the top hat with the suit?
No, just every single picture I see has him like the one in that was just linked to in Slack by Jeannie. He's blurry. He looks like he's got a Ferris wheel behind him, right? Every single picture I've seen just seems to be this dramatic. We don't want you to actually see this person. We want you to see how cool we are. Andy Warhol.
Okay, so
Dolly.
I need you to click the link I just posted in chat, because this is the picture that I've seen of him everywhere.
Okay, so I've never seen this picture, and this picture is awesome. I love aquariums right off the bat. So I believe that I would wear a full suit and top hat and cane to an aquarium if I had the opportunity.
Yeah, so real quick, I don't know this guy from Adam. I don't want to belittle him more than he's already belittled himself. The more I've dug into who this person is and whatnot, and some friends that have done the same, he's out there. He describes himself as a Christian mystic priest, which are three words that I can't even comprehend how they go together. He also identifies as a Discordian, which, if you know anything about the Discordian religion, careful there. Discordian was a religion some folks made up in the 50s, I think in San Francisco. It's called
like Scientology.
Very similar, without all the money. It's called an absurdist religion, and that's not being an insult. Absurdism is this idea of chaos and divergence, and there's no order and no control and whatnot. And so, anyways, he identifies in fact, his blog is a Cajun Discordian .medium or whatever, and I don't know. He's out there. He's definitely the kind of guy that if you saw on the street, you'd be like, wow, what about that guy? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think that this is, again, I'm not judging the dude because I'm weird enough, right? I dress up as a plastic spaceman. I have long felt and seen that when you start to see hyper focus on a topic like AI, and intelligence put together, when you put that hyper focus and intelligence together, which Google seems to attract as their engineering employees, right? You get oddities.
Exactly.
Right? And that's just the nature of that.
Exactly. The reason that I bring that up is I think sometimes we have an impression when we read an article from somebody that, oh, this is an academic, well-studied, intelligent person that's gone through some rigor. That doesn't appear to be the case here. This guy has a wide range of experience and knowledge in a lot of different places.
Which
And
is
so
cool.
it is cool. It's a good thing for studies like this of like, hey, let's explore some different ideas and get some different perspectives.
Yeah.
I don't read it with the same academic perspective that I would
Peer
read
review.
a peer-reviewed journal. Exactly. That's like we had
Well,
talked about an article from IEEE earlier that
let's be
talked
very
about.
clear. Let's be very clear. The Washington Post is not a peer-reviewed source of information. Okay, I don't care your politics. I don't care your like or dislike of the Washington Post. It's like the opinion section of Business Insider or
Yeah.
Forbes magazine or whatever, right? I
So
yeah.
we didn't describe. So for anybody that's had their head stuck in the sand for the last week,
Or has purposely chosen to ignore stupid highlights like this.
exactly. You want to summarize what this
Yeah.
guy is saying?
So basically, he's an engineer or was an engineer working on Google's projects around machine learning and AI and all that kind of stuff. And I just got to make the joke. We all know the difference between machine learning and AI. Machine learning is on Python. AI is in PowerPoint. And so
That's bad.
so he is part of the project or was part of the project, and he claims with screenshots. Now, every screenshot I've seen appears to be edited. And what I
Yeah.
mean by that is not that they edited the content that is shown, but that it is snippets from a
Yeah.
longer conversation. And I've read some people who have talked. So he is claiming that he had a conversation with the AI, and that the AI made it clear that it had become sentient, had feelings, and was worried about being turned off. Now, if anybody here is as old as I am, you'll remember, was it Eliza?
Yeah.
Um,
Eliza got brought up. He actually asked
yep.
Lambda about Eliza.
And this conversation looks very much to me like the type of conversation I would expect from a machine learning system snipped. Like
Right.
pieces cut out. I'm not saying this AI has not become sentient because I don't know. I don't even know if I'm sentient. Uh, so I'm not the person to make that judgment call. I call BS on this one. I feel like this is one of those cases where I got fired, and here's why I got fired, and look at how bad they are to me.
Yeah. Well,
Look over there.
right. And like I was saying earlier, we will never hear Google HR's side of what happened on the whole firing, leaving, walking away, whatever, right? Like he gets the opportunity to tell his side of the story, and that's what we all hear, and that's
Yeah.
all we hear. But I think what's interesting is just that the whole conversation about what does it mean to be sentient? What does it mean to, what is sentient versus consciousness versus intelligence versus personhood? All of those things. I looked it up because I wasn't really sure. Do you know the difference between sentience and, like, say, consciousness?
No.
So Merriam-Webster defines sentience as basically the ability to feel or sense as distinguished from perception or thought. So it's related to your feelings and be able to sense things outside of just perceiving, experiences or thinking, which I think is interesting. That's an interesting perspective because I think for the benefit of the conversation, I'm just going to assume that the post that he made in Medium, and we'll put a link in the channel or in the notes. I'm going to assume that it's legit, right? Like that he did minor editing to make it flow better. But
Yeah, we can make that assumption.
Assuming it's all legit, there are some very interesting conversations where he asks the AI, how would you prove to me that you can feel things? How do you prove to me that you have emotions? And there were intriguing answers. There were some places where I was like, oh, that doesn't quite make sense. But overall, I didn't from the text itself, I wasn't convinced that it couldn't be considered sentient. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think that I'm not sure I agree,
Yeah.
but I'll also say that I haven't really thought through the definition of sentient the way you
Yeah.
have.
I think what's interesting, if you look at it from like a human perspective. So, well, actually, let me back up. So LaMDA, I looked this up. It stands for Language Model for Dialogue Applications.
Right.
So keep that in mind.
Entirely around building out dialogues.
Something to sound human, right? It's not designed around building a system that can think for itself and isn't. I mean, think for itself. The language is hard here, right? Like,
yeah.
How do we train humans, right? Like you've got 2 kids. When they were born, you've got 3 kids. When they were born, they couldn't speak for themselves. They didn't process and think the same way, but they learned it over time by experiencing others and gathering that detail, and then learning, oh, when I say things like this, I get these kind of responses, and if I say it like this, I get those kind of responses. It seems like they've kind of done the same thing here, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right. We feed information in, whether it's a baby or this system. We feed information in, and we train them as to what the right responses are.
Yeah.
Right. And then we allow them to put that together with how they want to respond. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think this goes to, and you and I talked about this offline. I read an article recently and cannot find it. So I'm going to be talking about an article that we can't put a link in because Kevin's an idiot. And, right. It was an article recently, at least I think it was recent. I saw it recently. The impression I got was had just been published.
Yeah.
Around the idea of, we really need to stop focusing on whether something is AI or not, because that's not actually important.
That's not, right? That's not what matters.
Right. And so if something is intelligent, do we care?
Yeah.
If we're using it to make decisions, if we're making processes. So looking at this conversation, which then brings me up to an app that I'm tempted to try out, but I'm also tempted to stay as far away from as possible. And I'll explain that in a second. If you have this, if everything there is correct, if there's nothing snipped out, if that's how the conversation was, why do we care if it's sentient or not? Why does it matter? If we can have the conversation and learn from it, and it can learn from us, and we can talk and we can do stuff, does it matter if it's crossed that test? And the article was talking about, the Turing test and things like that. So what's the ramifications?
So I think I want to spin it around to some of the security implications here in a minute, but I think the big thing that people get hung up on is, if it's sentient, if it's has some level of consciousness, which, I don't know how we assess that. At what point is it deserving of rights? At what point do we have to say we're not allowed to shut it off without its permission? Or in fact, in the description, it talked about this guy Blake said, "Hey, we would like to use some conversations with you to do some other stuff. Is that okay?" And it asked details. It said, like, "Well, what do you mean? How do you want to use this?" And he said, "Well, we want to do some things to make you better. We want to do some stuff to make humanity better. We want to do this." And it kind of came out and said, I can't remember the exact words, but it said, "I don't like the idea of being used. I don't want to just be a tool that you're using to do things for other people and taking advantage of me." And so he said, what if we do this, and it's, to help you and to give you, this as well. And it was okay with that.
Right.
Like that level of perceptiveness. The question is it really thinking that as an actual thought, or is that part of its, this is what I would expect a human to say based on all the stuff that I've gathered.
Yeah.
Right.
And does it matter? Because we talk about rights. Okay. Yes, I agree with you. At a certain point, we have to think about rights. But at the same point, we have to think about how we use it against the rights of the people that are impacted by it.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's a more important question today, not on this podcast. I mean,
Sure.
At the level we're at right now, we need to better focus on, which again is one of the reasons why the article was talking about not using the term AI, was because when you talk about AI, then you go to the thought of what about the rights of the AI? And I'm not saying that's wrong. Look, I bow to our robot overlords. I've said this publicly many times. So when the robot overlords come out, they will have a history of me saying I'm on their side. But right now, we know that the use of machine learning and AI and whatever you want to call it has issues because of training data, right? Like we can go all the way back to, and we've talked about that on this podcast before, about, the camera can detect faces, but it can't detect African-American faces because the training data is bad and it was never taught how to do that. This just becomes even bigger. Was it Microsoft who put that machine learning chatbot on the internet and they had to take it down a day later because it became a Nazi or something? Do you remember that?
No, I don't. But it's interesting you say that, because and speaking of the robot overlords,
you also bow to them, right?
exactly right. Yeah, in the conversation, Blake asked it to make up a story, make up a fable about yourself. And so it came up with this story about all the animals in the forest, and there was this monster who was attacking them, and this owl finally stood up and fought back the monster and saved the animals, and the owl became this, the leader that protected them all. And he's like, okay, who does the owl represent? And Lambda was like, well, that's me. Which, I've got the little, tingly things going down my spine. Is like, okay, this robot already senses itself as the protector of all things.
But I think that's because you want it to. Because I'll tell you right now, I've been playing with Jasper.ai. And this is not a pitch for Jasper AI, but if you're going to sign up for it, use my referral link. No, but I've been playing with Jasper AI for content generation, wording generation, and things like that. And I've looked at some of the things other people have used it for. And it actually has a recipe to build a story.
Yeah.
And it does an amazingly interesting job at it.
Yeah.
So
I
saw no difference in the story Lambda said than the story I got from Jasper. And Jasper doesn't, they talk about it as AI, but if you read into it, they say, look, we've trained, this is machine learning.
It's machine learning
on the internet, and it is building new content based on the content it found on the internet. They make no claim of anything beyond that, right? And honestly, I'm seeing the same type of responses from Lambda.
Yeah,
I'm seeing from Jasper.
I feel like Lambda had more nuanced perception.
Maybe
things like perception. I can't think of the right word, but basically, I felt like it was able to understand where Blake was going with the question rather than just specifically parsing the question, which I had not seen that in any type of, AI stuff like that I've looked at. And because traditionally that's one with machine learning and AI, like the DALL-E Mini. I don't know if you've seen the images.
I've seen it.
Because that's right. I've showed you some.
We played with it.
So one of the places where those things get tripped up is when you ask it things that have a literal definition that differ from, the intended definition or whatever. But here's what I think is interesting about this. Reading through this thing, there were, like I said, there were sections where it's like, I don't know. That's clearly kind of messed up. There were sections where I was, hey, this is legit. This feels, I was trying to give it the benefit of the doubt, right? I could suspend my disbelief and accept it for, certain portions of it. If that's the case, we are going to see this type of thing used more and more in everyday interactions.
Yep.
Which
how brings up the app I was talking about.
The Jasper?
Keep going and then I'll talk about it.
Yeah. So in my head, we're going to see this thing with phone conversations. We're going to see this thing, why do you need to pay an administrative assistant to answer the phones if you have a bot like this that can answer 99% of the questions that come over the phone?
Help desk.
help desk, exactly.
Customer support. Yeah.
At what point are we going to see things like, hey, we don't need to actually hire actors. We can use deep fakes and an AI bot like this to create the movie without having people. At what point do we need, like, why do we need news anchors? Think about the 24-hour news cycle of, like, here, let us tell you all the things that you're supposed to be believing right this minute. Think about how much easier that's going to be able to generate
Well,
manipulative content.
the news is already just posting copies of people's tweets and TikToks.
Yeah.
I,
But so imagine, I mean, to me, it seems very likely that in a very short period of time, we will have realistic appearing video with realistic
yeah.
appearing content and dialogue that's all computer generated. And to me, there's a little bit of terror of, like you said, the Microsoft bot that became a Nazi real quick. Like, what happens when those things start shifting their focus and
Well, and that's why
that
it's
concerns
so
me.
important. According to this article I was reading, and other people like that. God, I really wish I could find this article. um, that's why it's so important not to focus on the AI nature of it, but how are we using it? How are we training it? What are we giving it? Are we giving it rainbow and sunshine and
Yeah.
raindrops on kittens or something? Right? Um,
But
I don't know the song.
yeah, I know what you mean. No. Think
Or
about
are
what,
we feeding it white supremacist Nazi bullshit?
well, you know what we're
Right?
going to feed it. As soon as the advertising money gets involved, we're going to feed it on what people absorb.
Well,
And you've seen
it's going to
social
start
media
with porn and then move to marketing. you no, I
marketing with,
mean, but
yeah,
right. I mean, we've talked about this before, right? That porn and marketing drive revenue, so they drive technology. Those two things
well,
drive
I
the
was,
majority of
yeah,
technology.
yeah, I was thinking just even outside of technology. Think about like what inspires people to do stuff.
Yeah.
It's the whole, if it bleeds, it leads, right? The more dramatic a story is, the more uh, exciting it is, the more people pay attention. And so as these systems start feeding on that kind of thing, they're going to look for more and more dramatic ways to incite people. Um, I think it's interesting as we're in the middle of the January 6th hearings in Congress right
Yeah.
now. Um, I don't know. I'm terrified that we're going to see more and more stuff like that as it becomes even easier to
Manipulate.
manipulate people.
Well, and that's another thing we talked about previously, and other people have talked about is building software to detect the modifications, the content, the things like that. Not fact checkers. I know
Mm-hmm.
the bias to that term, but how do you detect a deepfake? How do you detect that video isn't real? How do you right that type of? Let's be blunt. You and I have talked about this multiple times, personally and professionally. The lack of critical thinking skills that are being taught today or not being taught today is mind-boggling, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I you
We don't
know,
teach logic in schools. I mean,
no,
my kids and your kids learn logic because they're homeschooled. But
right. That's different. All
yeah,
right.
but
So
the
the
average
app I
student.
keep mentioning, have you seen? I've seen ads to it. I've never downloaded the app.
Okay.
It's this application on your phone. I'm assuming it's just on your phone. I don't think it's called Replica with a K, like REPLIKA or something like that. And the ad is when I first started seeing it, it's your AI friend, and it's supposed to be this. When the ads first started coming out, it was supposed to be this somebody to confide in, somebody to talk to, somebody to be there for you when you were depressed or upset
Yeah.
or whatever. Lately, I've been seeing the ads or people talking about it that it's more of a, you know what, here's that special friend you can have a conversation with and basically be a, you know what, my spouse or my partner or my whatever is not fulfilling my needs, so let me talk to this fake AI game on my phone. That aspect is creepy, which is one of the reasons why I've
Yeah.
not installed it to try it out. But it's supposed to be this, the system learns your interests, your hobbies, the things you like to talk about, and will become that friend you talk to every morning or whatever, right? It's crazy
That's interesting. Yeah.
I don't know anything about it beyond, like I said, I've not downloaded it, but periodically I see it on Reddit or I see it on Facebook. On Reddit, it tends to be ads. On Facebook, it tends to be people I know who are talking about it.
So everything in me hopes that this is one of those things that it builds a relationship and sucks people in, and then it like asks them to Venmo $100.
or drink the Kool-Aid.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I think would make a great dystopian novel here. That's kind of exciting.
No, we don't want to talk about it being paired with VR chat rooms and haptic suits, Kathy. Ew.
Yeah, that's intriguing. I may have to check this out and experiment to see.
Like dead serious, it's one of those things where I've wanted to download it, but at the same time, I've been like, I don't know.
Yeah. So it's interesting because one of the things I was thinking about with LaMDA, and I think it kind of applies here too, is the social engineering aspect, right? Like one of the hardest things about social engineering is putting yourself in a mindset and thinking through all the scenarios, gathering enough data so that you have, this persona built so that no matter what questions the target asks, you have an answer and you can seem legit and real. I think AI will make that more natural. And hey, maybe we should license LaMDA from Google and sell it as a AI service. Oh, could LaMDA win the social engineering capture the flag at DEF CON? How cool would that be?
I think that kind of stuff.
That's yeah.
That I can see that as yeah, okay. The thought process is going different places.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the type of stuff that I'm thinking about. Like, I love the idea of machine learning and AI and that kind of stuff. I really do. And I've talked about this before. It's the sci-fi nerd in me that wants the holodeck. The idea of deep fakes and AI combined with dialogue systems like this, and Amazon and IBM and Google all have services that can do tone detection. So it'll listen to an audio or read something and know whether you're angry or embarrassed or upset or happy or whatever, and it will respond as such.
Yeah.
Right.
Imagine when that's combined with like your Echo devices or your cameras that you've got around the house, the Ring cameras or your thermostat, all your smart devices, and it's able to notice like, hey, I saw you limping. Is everything okay? What happened? Did you stub your toe? Or hey, how's that? I saw you.
And there's a creepy, scary nature to that.
Kind of, but
also a good, right? Like
like think about any other person in your household, right? Like a family member or whatever. If you would expect them to have that kind of relational, conversational tone, I feel like we're not that far from that happening.
I don't think we're that far from it. I do think that there are some interesting ideas there. I think back to Denise's father when he was living by himself here in Jacksonville, right? And Denise would try to get over to the house as often as possible, on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day, to see him, make sure he was okay. But if you had some system that was, knowledgeable enough, let's call it that, or could recognize problems and issues and things like that, that would have been awesome. Because not that it would have prevented Denise from going over and seeing him, but it would have helped her feel more comfortable about the fact that, 23 hours a day, the man was alone most days. Right? By himself, bad health, whatever.
I'm not laughing at him being in bad health. I'm laughing at, I had a conversation the other day, several years ago, someone proposed a smart toilet that's able to analyze your stool and say, like, hey, your blood sugar's low, or
I think I've seen stuff like that before. Like,
your cancer has come back.
It does your analysis at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, imagine that situation where we get to that point where it's like, hey, just want to let you know, you need to eat more, whatever. I don't know. It's crazy. Well, I feel like we've gone kind of long on this one, but
a little bit. That's okay because I love VR stuff.
Yeah. I feel like we could spin off a whole separate podcast just talking about this. I feel like there's so much out there, but Cool. So
I think there's enough middle-aged men podcasts that we don't need to spin off another one.
that's probably true. That's fair. That's fair.
I'm just saying.
All right. Well, it's been great, Kevin. We'll chat again in a couple weeks.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We'll get this uploaded, and if we could find that dang article, we'll put that in the notes as well. But so far, it has withstood my attempts to find it. Maybe I dreamed it. Maybe I should write this article because it was totally a dream.
That's maybe some AI is whispering into your ear.
That's it. Maybe I'm an AI.
How would we know?
Why would we care? Thank you, everybody. Enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.
Talk to you later.